Welcome to Media Relations 101 webinar. I'm glad you could all join us today. My name is Carrie Hardison. I'm the Education Manager for the Oregon Wine Board. A couple of things before we get started. Well, first I want to mention that this is our first webinar, so that if things are a little bit clunky, it's because we're still learning how to use all the tools and change presenters and such. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. All attendees are on mute, so there's nothing that you have to do on your end. The way that you're going to communicate with us today is to send your questions via the question box. We built in some time at the end of the presentation for some questions and answers, so that's the time that we'll address those at that time. We are recording this, and it will be available at the industry.oregonwine.org/education industry website. Here you can see on the screen on our industry website, it says education. I've been building out this portion of the website for the last couple of months, and we have a couple of really nice features. Here where it says educational media, if you click on that, those are going to be where we're going to be housing all of our presentations. We have some past presentations that we've listed, as well as this is where you're going to find a recording of this presentation today as well. And with that, I'm going to introduce our presenters today. We're going to be hearing from Michelle Kaufman. She's the communications manager at the Oregon Wine Board. She manages all media outreach, industry communications such as the Grapevine newsletter and OWB's industry website. Today, Michelle will discuss what is media relations and how it's evolved in the past decade. Dixie Huey has 15 years of wine industry experience guiding wineries through the media relations landscape. She has also worked as a buyer, wine marketing instructor, judge, and traveled extensively to world wine regions. Dixie holds an MBA in finance and the Wine Spirit Education's Trust Advanced Certificate. Dixie will discuss a recent survey of the media and the current landscape for working effectively with them. Marilyn Hawkins has more than 30 years of experience in public relations and marketing communications. Her strengths are corporate communications, reputation management, business and trade media relations, employee communications, community outreach, and crisis response. Marilyn will discuss effective strategies for earning coverage. I'm now going to pass it over to Michelle.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, or introduction, Carrie. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Kaufman, and I am the Communications Manager here at the Oregon Wine Board. So before we get into what is media relations and how do we work with them, I thought it made sense to take a step back and look at what is public relations. And what it is a discipline that engages and informs key audiences known as publics. It also brings vital information back to an organization for analysis and action. It has a real measurable impact on the strategic organizational goals and making sure that we've hit those achievements. So in today's webinar, we're going to look at a subset of public relations known as media relations. And when we say media, we're talking about writers and editors, bloggers, TV and radio hosts. So just like media relations is a subset of public relations, advertising is a subset of marketing. And a lot of people get these two things confused, which makes sense because they're complementary fields that have a lot of similarities. But marketing tends to focus more on sales. It focuses on the consumer and meeting their demands by moving goods and services from a producer through distribution and ultimately on to the consumer. Media relations, however, tends to focus on working specifically with writers. And it only focuses on this one audience, whereas public relations as a whole looks at the demands of the general public and important stakeholders such as legislators and investors. So in the last several years, the media relations landscape has been changing rapidly due to the widespread adoption of social technologies, changing societal expectations, and globalization. For decades, media relations was used only to push information to key audiences. And this worked when there was a limited number of outlets. But today, the self-explosion of self-publishing writers has led to a tsunami of content. For example, news used to be something that was sought out. You would read the morning paper or watch the nightly news. Today, the most trusted news source is someone I know or someone I trust, and that news is shared via social media or text messages. Even in the wine world, to be a wine writer, you used to have to be a wine expert. Today, you just have to be a dang good writer. So with millions of news sources and everyone functioning as a publisher, now more than ever, media relations requires a communications function that is constantly listening to and evaluating what that target audience is talking about. But knowing the traditional news origins and how content gets published is advantageous when creating it, because content that matters is the only thing that's going to get shared. So ask yourself when you're writing something, will people care and will they share? But no matter how much has changed, a lot of things have stayed the same. You have got to be credible. You've got to build relationships with these writers and know what they write and talk about. And you've got to have the ability to tell your story in a way that makes you stand out in a sea of wineries worldwide. So I'm now going to bring in Dixie Huey, proprietor of Trellis Growth Partners, to discuss a recent survey of the media and the current landscape for working with them effectively.
Good morning. I'd first like to just do a test screen share check and also a test audio check. Do you have me live, Michelle?
We do indeed, Dixie, whenever you are ready.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's get started. Thank you all for coming today. I hope you're feeling happy about your progress in 2015. At this time of year, I'm always so thankful for all of the relationships that we built and the people that we get to work with. We really truly are all blessed to work in such a wonderful industry that has so much collaboration, and really thankful to Michelle and Carrie and their team at the Oregon Wine Board, as well as Marilyn, for pulling this together. This is great, and all of you can sit there with coffee and not have to leave your location. So let's dive in. Before I do that, though, I just want to give you a little more information about Trellis Growth Partners. I started this company in 2008 to help wineries achieve their visions through marketing communications. We're a team of 3 talented communicators, and we talk to, on average, about 40 or 50 wine media each week. And so we're always listening and learning. And so that was part of what really motivated this research, because you know, we all hold true, you know, we think that it's this way, but then through research we can find, well, actually no, the data says something else, or perhaps the data is actually telling us what we're doing is spot on. And so my team and I thought, well, let's go to the people that we are charged with serving and ask them what they want, how things have changed, and how we can do a better job as a team as well as an industry of serving them. And so that's what motivated this research. And so we will dive in and take a look at what we found. The first thing to keep in mind is that, you know, there's a reality of media that has changed tremendously, even in the 15 years since I've been doing this. We live in a world of constant communication. It's everywhere. You know, the landscape has changed tremendously, and, you know, the days of the fact checker and the editor and the separate photographer have really given way to many more media, but each individual member of the media is charged with doing more and more. And so we're going to take a look at what that looks like through this data that we have to share with you today. The first thing to keep in mind is just this incredible amount of information that's going from wineries to media. 40% of our respondents are receiving shipments weekly. So that's, of course, if you do the simple math, that's 52 shipments a year, and often there aren't 52 columns a year that they're writing. An astounding 20% of them is receiving 200 shipments a year. Wine every 2 out of 3 days. Also, they're being communicated with a lot more. They're pitched at least weekly by individual wineries and agencies such as our own. 40% are pitched daily, and some 20% are pitched multiple times a day. So again, the world of constant communication, all of these items are basically asks of the media. So there's much more asking being done than there is an availability of stories to write. So we contrast this with the fact that very few media are employed full-time. 13%, a very low number, work full-time on staff at a publication. 21% are full-time freelancers. And that leaves more than 50% who are part-time freelancers. And what that means is that the majority of people covering our industry have other jobs. So the other job might be working for a distributor or working in a retail or restaurant location, or it could be something completely different. Just yesterday, I made contact with a gentleman in Illinois who's a full-time physician, runs a wine store, and writes about wine once a week. So they all, like we do, have a lot going on, and so we need to keep that in mind. This image here is chosen because it represents the fact that the media are not just writing the stories. You know, now you've got to take your own photos, you've got to do your own interviews. These, especially freelancers, really have to make a full production and then pitch that work to a publication. So they're often not even on assignment when they're writing a story. So something to keep in mind. What all this means is that there are many people who are working for more than one outlet, because that's just the nature of being a freelance journalist. They might have 5 or 10 different outlets. And we often get asked, well, what about this blogger? I'm not sure about the following that they have on social media, for example. Is it really worth my time to engage with them? And I would say that, you know, of course, the answer just depends. But to keep in mind that today's blogger with some talent might be tomorrow's Jameson Fink at Wine Enthusiast. And so Jameson, a lot of you probably know him because he used to live in Seattle, and he started Wine Without Worry, has a podcast, is a tremendous writer, and now is living in New York and is on staff at Wine Enthusiast. So it's really more of a matter of research and taking a look at who this individual is, and that word's going to come up again. You know, what's the quality of his writing? What is his social following? Is it growing? Do we feel that this person is out meeting with people, producing quality work? You know, that's Jameson. So while, yes, there are very few people out there who maybe aren't contributing excellent content, I would certainly not dismiss bloggers. They are here to stay, and they also contribute to magazines and newspapers. So what does all this mean? The one thing to keep in mind from what we're calling media reality here is that there are just way more asks of media than there are opportunities for coverage. And so there's this sort of fraction out there. And so then the question, the so what question for all of you is, well, how do I get my winery in the news? What should I do? And so the first step is what we're doing right now. We're understanding their reality so that we can best work with them, speaking their language. So another thing to keep in mind is that social media is a very important tool for journalists. A third are using Facebook and Twitter regularly for work purposes, and almost 20% are using Instagram. And this will come up again, so keep that in mind. This is part of the data set that really surprised me. I will make a confession. I thought that my hypothesis was that Napa Valley was going to have off-the-chart strong communication rating, and that perhaps here in the Pacific Northwest we wouldn't have as strong a rating. And this question was asked as follows. Please rate the communication from these wine regions. We selected Napa, Willamette Valley, and Walla Walla just to have more specific regions instead of states. And then they were able to give it a strong, a solid, needs improvement. And so, of course, we all want to be rated as strong. And again, I was very surprised that Napa, you know, really only had 37% rating for strong communication. And really surprised too that Walla Walla had 11%. So what the net of all of this tells me is that this is opportunity. We can all improve our proactive communication. The good news is they do want to hear from us. So on that note, the main thing to keep in mind when serving the media is that it's a relationship. And we will look at how we can build relationships in the next set of slides, how we serve the media. So the good news here is that there are two very simple ways to improve your relationships with the press. As Michelle said in one of her slides, share. 90% of our respondents are interested in having their work recognized on social media. Super easy to thank them via social media, promote their work. Contrast this with the fact that only 21% of respondents said that they are frequently thanked for their coverage. So there's this huge gap there where it doesn't cost us any money. It's just a little bit of time to recognize their work on social media by sharing it, and perhaps even to write a handwritten thank you note. It's not a thing of the past. Remember that you're dealing with writers, and the old-fashioned thank you note is very appreciated, and it will certainly keep your winery front of mind. I have an example for you from the road. I will not mention the Oregon producer, but I will tell you I was in Minneapolis this fall for my husband's family reunion, and I was so impressed by this wine shop. It had this huge collection of Oregon wines, a wall of Oregon, and I thought, oh my goodness, who is this guy? I need to meet him and thank him for being such an ambassador of Oregon's wines. And I noticed a case stack on the floor, and I thought, wow, now how do you get to be that winery? And I asked him about it, and I said, well, why is this particular one, receiving even more love? And he said, hold on one moment. And he dug through some papers behind the checkout area, and he produced a thank you note that had been sent to him by the owner of this winery, mentioning how wonderful it was to have been hosted there and to give a winemaker dinner. And he said, so many people call on me and they think that, well, it's just my job to promote them, and they act as though they're doing me a favor. Here's a winery that gets it and realizes that I have so many choices when it comes to, having a shelf placement or a case stack, and this person took the time to thank me. And so that's, of course, a retail example, but it's the same thing. And I was just blown away by the fact that he was able to produce this card, and, of course, that it was a producer that I really admire. So thank them and share their work. Okay, here's another thing you can do. We all have samples because we're making wine. So keep in mind that 90% of our respondents are interested in receiving samples, and 65% of that group is very interested. And this may come across as, well, of course, they're media covering wine, but we do hear things, for example, that, well, I don't need to send that person a sample because I saw him at an event. And the fact is that most media, particularly the ones operating at a really high level, have a whole process that they go through for tasting and cataloging wines. Sort of the more following of the journalist, the more detailed the process. Sean Sullivan, who is in Seattle and covers the full industry, and particularly in the Pacific Northwest here, tastes each wine 3 times. His wife is annoyed by that because there's always wine all over their house, but he's very detailed about it. He not only wants to have that first snapshot, he wants to see how the wine evolves over time. He takes his work very seriously. So something to keep in mind regarding samples is that, yes, it's your #1 tool. So we still need to know how the individual journalist wants to be served. 41% of our respondents said, send the samples proactively. I don't have time to go back and forth over, what I want, when I want it. Just get it to me and I'll catalog it and taste it on my own time. 49% want to be pitched first. meaning, hey, Sean, do you happen to be in town? Here's what I have for you. Here's this selection or this theme of wines. Would you like to receive it? And then that gives him the opportunity to say, no, thanks, I've covered that, or I'm not interested in that, or I can't sell that story, or sure, yes, send it on, and I'll add it into my 3 times tasting protocol. So establishing that personal relationship is really the key to understanding their preferences. And while, yes, this takes more time instead of just blanket emailing or blanket sending samples, this is how you can help your winery stand out in that crowd, is by simply asking the question, how can we best work with you? So I said that the word individual would come up, and meaning also to connect in person. 83% are interested in attending media events. 82% are interested in individual meetings with owners and winemakers. I can tell you that one of the tactics that we have used to help our clients is creating effective and interesting small group media experiences where we get the principals there, we have a theme, it's a very detailed operation behind the scenes, but once everyone shows up, it's what we all enjoy. One of the reasons being in this industry is so great is sitting around the table, sharing stories, wine, and having a meal. And so keep in mind that in-person interaction is so important, and it really helps years down the road. So another thing you can do in your travels is reach out to media and ask if they would like to get coffee, taste wine, or have a meal while you're in that market. So personalization stays here with us in the theme when we're talking about pitching. So how do writers want to be pitched? Well, they prefer email, so that's something to keep in mind. We do use the telephone in our agency. That's a way to really keep a relationship going and ask questions about the wife or the dog. But especially if you don't yet have that relationship, or you have something that you want to maybe get a quick response on, to send that email is what they have told us they would like overwhelmingly. We also need to pitch effectively. The blast email system, what I call the Dear Sir, no one likes the smell of that. They all want to feel like you are sharing something from you with them that is personal to them. Because if you keep in mind that over 50% of these folk are part-time freelancers, they've got to shop the story. And if everyone's shopping the same story, that doesn't really work because there aren't enough buyers for that same story. So we call this pivoting. Coming up, you may have one story, but you can come up with different smaller angles that might relate specifically to this individual writer's preferences. So for example, someone might have more of like a lifestyle type angle or hospitality angle, and you wouldn't hone in on perhaps as much the wine itself. It might be more the experience at the winery. Before you do any reaching out or conceiving of a pitch, you want to start by understanding who the journalist is. So check out her blog, look at her social media following, try to understand what types of conversation are interesting to her, and that will help you come up with that pivot angle that makes what you have to share more interesting on that personal level. Press releases. Press releases, I was actually surprised that 57% were still interested or very interested. You get a member of the media alone in a car or something on the way to the event, and they love to complain about how many press releases they've gotten and all the follow-up emails that they've gotten. So the thing to keep in mind with press releases is it's really only when you have true news. A medal or a new vintage of the same variety is not news. Perhaps a vineyard acquisition, a new winemaker, and it's still good to personalize that release. So maybe as you're emailing your group of journalists, you've done that research and you've said, hey, I loved your article this morning on the new hot varieties coming out of Oregon. Thank you so much for recognizing our industry. I have something with you that I'm sharing with a group, but I thought you might be interested because of X. And that X gets their attention because they realize that you took the time to personalize it. So press trips. While this isn't something that typically an individual winery would be doing unless it's more of an individual group that has multiple properties, just given that media need to see many angles when they're going to agree to take a few days out of the office to come on a press trip. This is something that the Oregon Wine Board does really effectively. Each year, Michelle and her team bring in a group of people, many from outside of this region, and go and visit each and every AVA and talk about the stories of Oregon. So they're particularly effective when you do them with a regional group. But we did find that 3/4 of respondents are interested in press trips. Only 5% are not allowed to accept them, and this is just typically employer policy where they can't be seen as taking any sort of payment because it might affect journalistic integrity. So what we're saying for you all that's actionable is collaborate with your industry colleagues, create an experience if you'd like to do a press trip, and this will also help you share the costs. Or perhaps speak to Michelle about what she is trying to put together and how your winery or your sub-region might be able to get involved. I would say to bring her a good idea, though, because everyone, of course, wants to be involved in that. But this can be a wonderful way to share, to set foot on the property, smell the smells, taste the wine, meet the people. It's an unforgettable experience if you're a journalist in New York or DC to really come and see what is here and set foot on that soil. So one of my favorite questions, if you could make one change to how we communications professionals operate, what would that be? So they are consistent in their responses. They want personalized pitches. They want you to communicate more, and that doesn't necessarily mean more frequency of communication. It really means more effectively, and to be responsive. This may not be the #1 pet peeve of journalists, but if you've got a question from someone and they've left you a voicemail or sent you an email, they're often on deadline, so get back to them. They can print their story regardless of whether you do, but if you'd like to be in the story, that's the way to help ensure that, is that you get back to them. Be original. Again, that relates to personalizing your pitches. Know your place. This is more of an integrity thing. So, for example, Michelle wouldn't go to someone she is pitching, attend the press trip and say, well, you know, if I fly you out here, you're going to need to write a piece for this publication. It's a little more subtle than that in what we do. They want you to give more notice on your events. No one wants to feel like they're the sort of C-list wedding invite. So if you're going to plan an event, give them at least a month's notice, even if it's just to save the date and you don't yet have all the details. That makes them feel like the A-list guest there. I hate to say I was surprised that Have a Good Trade page was still up there. I really hope that we can all put up a trade page in 2016 if we don't have one. It's a simple thing to do, and it really helps serve media so that they're not scrambling around looking for things. Make your wine pricing clear when you send samples. You get extra credit if you put a little sticker on the back that has the price. And then, of course, send fewer press releases, because that's really not the most effective form of communication for pitching individual stories, which is what we know that they would like. So 20% of these respondents said to personalize that communication. 10% said responsiveness was lacking. And the way we asked this question, it's important to understand, they were able to say one thing that they wished that we would change. And so when 10% of them mention the same thing, that is statistically significant. It may seem like, oh, we're doing pretty good, 90%. It doesn't work that way. So they do not want blast email, more frequent personal communication. And interestingly, we do host, as an agency, a good number of events during the work week, because that's often when our clients prefer to do this type of business. One thing that we do need to keep in mind and that we learned is that given that more than 50% of this media is working, that doing something on evening and weekends would be a good thing to do. So we've even thought about offering options and maybe running the small event twice. But keep that in mind if you decide to plan a gathering for 2016. So I would like to end with just these 4 simple steps for improving your winery's media relations. Keep in mind that you're building a relationship and you're working with this person on an individual basis. Take the time to do the research, learn and notate their preferences and interests. Recognize and embrace the value of sending samples. It's your best marketing tool. And the good news is you already have it. Do avoid the no-nos, sending press releases that really aren't newsworthy, for example, and especially not following up to see if someone has received something. We can assume, I love the Jimmy Buffett song. We joke about that here in the office. If the phone doesn't ring, it's me. So if they don't get back to you, they're just simply not interested 99% of the time. So respect that, maybe next time. And then finally, ensure that you have the correct assets. That trade page needs your visual assets, logo, bottle shots, photography of people and your winery, your vineyards. Also your tech sheets with pricing. So these are items that a number of them, 3 of them in fact, don't really cost money. They just cost time. So keep that in mind. We wish you a wonderful holiday and a very productive and high-selling 2016. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Marilyn Hawkins. She has a terrific presentation to share with you all, and I think that you'll learn a lot.
Terrific. Well, here's a little about my wine background. Moved to Ashland from Seattle a decade ago and really fell in love with the wine industry. I've worked with the Rogue Valley Wine Growers Association, the Southern Oregon Wine Institute at Umpqua Community College, helped promote a couple of major custom crush facilities here, and many individual wineries and vineyards. A couple of years ago, I started a best practices discussion group here called the Wine Marketing Roundtable, and in January, I'm launching a new wine business blog called So Wine. Today, I'm going to really focus on what some people might call the traditional media. That is print, broadcast, and established online outlets, not so much on social media. And my emphasis is really on getting news and feature stories and profiles, not so much on reviews and ratings. There are 3 distinct yet sometimes overlapping types of media, and they fall into 3 rough buckets. Wine trade publications such as Wines and Vines, Great Northwest Wines, Wine Enthusiasts, and of course wine bloggers. I think of them as trade media, but they often write for consumers, obviously. Second big bucket is consumer media, Sunset Magazine, Portland Monthly, Southern Oregon, online news and lifestyle sites, daily newspapers, radio and television. All of those media are really geared to specific to consumer audiences. And lastly, there's the business media, everything from the Wall Street Journal to Oregon Business to Portland Business Journal, Fast Company, and that crossover publication, Wine Business Monthly and winebusiness.com. You certainly see a lot of business information there. Smart wineries and vineyards have strategies in place for working effectively with all 3 types of these media. So why bother? Why bother to take the time to publicize your business? Well, given the amount of time and work that's involved, it's certainly not free advertising as some people think. Here's the real reason, though. People you want to influence, they see, they hear, they share, and they remember your good ink. In whatever form that quote-unquote ink comes. Sadly, nobody passes around your stunning advertising, but they do pass around your publicity. Plus, positive publicity provides you with excellent sales literature, website content and links, social media fodder, club shipment inserts, and, as you've seen in a lot of tasting rooms, people hang up their good coverage. So to get the kind of media coverage that any business craves, you need to have a few important tools of the trade. First, it's vital that you develop and constantly update a media contacts database. It's your media CRM system, and it should contain all relevant information about the media outlet, the key people there, what they cover, what they don't cover. Michelle at the Wine Board is willing to share her database with OWB members, so if you haven't built a good database or you need to expand yours, get in touch with Michelle. You also need a very well-written, concise 1- or 2-page fact sheet that's regularly updated. I think of this as a little different than your trade information. I really think of this as something that's just the facts, ma'am, information specifically for reporters. It's a summary of your business. It's designed to educate writers in a hurry. It provides a brief overview of the business, a little history, product service summary, and who to contact for more information. In addition to that fact sheet, you need some brief, very tightly focused bios on the key people in the company. And current headshots are very important too. And since, speaking of photography, since we've become such a visual culture, it's really important to regularly add to your library of interesting high-resolution photography of the tasting room, your vineyards, the winery, bottle shots, key people, and more. I think one of your best marketing investments in 2016 might be some additional professional photography. It helps to have brief, relevant backgrounders on your wines, winemaking styles, farming practices, market status, whatever. And smart wineries put all these materials in a section of their websites called a newsroom, or some people call it media kit. If you want to see a good example one, Chateau Saint Michel has a good media kit on its website. And if you use Citrix, you can also even store your publicity assets on their servers, like big winery in California, Kendall Jackson does. So, speaking of reporters and editors, you've got to treat them like respected colleagues. Dixie emphasized this, but I want to come back to it. Sometimes people think of the reporters and writers as pushy annoyances. It's a little surprising to me that sometimes many otherwise sophisticated business people have disdain for the news media. They only write about controversies, or they never cover all the good stuff we do, or they never get the story right. Sometimes people think that. But just remember, reporters need you and you need them, so learn to dance with them well. You can do that simply by, and just to reiterate Dixie's point, understand their deadlines and their daily pressures, and accept the fact that, yes, they may contact you at inconvenient times. But always return their calls or their emails. Help them find things quickly, and sometimes it's not even things that relate to your business. They may call you about something that relates, that they feel that you can help them with. Help them find things quickly. Compliment their professional skills. When I encourage people to write thank you notes, it's never a, gee, thank you for giving that great exposure to us. It's, gee, you really did a good job of explaining the complex thing that we're doing here. Compliment their professional skills. And compliment them even when they're not covering you. If you see them do stories that you think are particularly well done, that don't even feature you, let them know that. And it's really important to settle any disagreements with them directly, not go above their heads. If they have editors, don't complain to the editor. If you've got a problem with something a writer, a reporter, an editor, or someone did, make sure you deal directly with that person first. Remember, friends cover friends. You don't have to invite reporters over for Christmas dinner, but they do need to like and trust you and support you as a professional colleague. Okay, so what makes news and what doesn't? In addition to all of these elements, magnitude, prominence, conflicts, all of those are elements that are a particularly good bait for reporters and editors. The most important thing to remember, though, is they call it news, not olds. So what do reporters write? What do they cover? Well, they write stories. They write stories about new, interesting people, places, and things. So what are you doing now or soon that others aren't? Say, have you brought in a herd of cute baby doll sheep to keep the vineyard weeds at bay? They're short enough to eat the weeds, but not tall enough to eat the grapes. Just think of the photo possibilities associated with something like that. Also, think long and hard about what's your compelling point of view. What's your personal new insight or your winery's insight or a novel approach? For example, if you're the first in your area to install a new gravity flow system in the winery, feature writers will want to know not about the technical details necessarily of gravity flow, but they want to know, how does the average wine drinker benefit from this new system? Overcoming obstacles is a really good storyline too, but people don't always like to admit their vulnerabilities. However, there may be some really good dramatic tension in a story about how you significantly improved your winery or your vineyard's employee safety record after a serious slip and fall workplace accident. You've all heard the expression of dog bites man. Well, those dog bites man stories are a dime a dozen. So I encourage you to flip it. I mean, who would conduct a vineyard tour in the winter? And more importantly, why would you go look at the vineyard in the winter? What is there to see that you wouldn't normally see during the high season? Or what winery takes their club members behind the scenes in the winery to see what goes on after crush, not during crush? Major milestones are a particularly good area for story ideas too. For example, did you just sign up your 1,000th member to a wine club right after adding a wildly popular pick-your-own six-pack shipment option? One last example of story ideas that reporters find interesting are kind of problem resolutions. For example, what's your vineyard, your winery, or your wine region doing now to mitigate the likely effects of climate change or looming water shortages? Those are just kind of some example ideas of ways in which you can attract reporters' attentions. The key, though, is to not wait for them to find you, and that requires that you stay on top of industry, business, and consumer trends. Are you making a new GSM, for example? So pitch a story about how and why red blends are becoming so popular. Maybe the element of that story is your winemaker has a unique approach to blending trials. It's important that you be a story snooper in your own business. Sometimes you get so caught up in your own business you can't see what the interesting things that are going on all around you. So I encourage people to constantly ask their customers, their staff, their business advisors, their investors, and their distributors, what are we doing that you think is really cool? Let's list the ideas from them. And it's important that you get good at writing story pitches. Dixie emphasized this, and I want to hammer it again. A news release is rarely enough because many reporters believe there's precious little news in most releases. I think the best story idea, the best stories come from brief emails. For example, here's one that worked well. The Oregon Shakespeare Festival attracts more than 150,000 tourists to Ashlands every year. Many of them long ago gave up Class 4 river rafting because they're older, but they do like to wine tour. And there's a new Bear Creek Wine Trail came together to welcome them. Would you like to talk with some local winery owners about what they're doing to roll out the wine red carpet? And to personalize that story, I wouldn't offer up the same winery people to each reporter. Shift it a little bit, pivot, as Dixie would say. Another simple story pitch is something like this. This family has farmed thousands of acres in the Pacific Northwest for 100 years. Their fruit trees love the valley floors, but their newly planted vineyards love the hillsides. There's a good ag transformation story here, and this owner-grower can explain all the working parts. It's just a way to attract the attention of reporters. So once you get their interest, you got to close the deal and give a good interview. As the old saying goes, no storyteller, no story. You'd never go unprepared into a meeting with the opportunity to sell 4 pallets of wine or 10 tons of grapes. You wouldn't be unprepared in that circumstance. So don't try to answer reporters' questions off the cuff. It's really important, if you get a surprise contact from a reporter, ask if you can get back to him or her in a bit, after you know that person's deadline, obviously. Then take time to prepare for the interview. Know exactly what you want to talk about and not talk about. Rehearse your answers and get to the point promptly. Reporters never ask you exactly the questions you're prepared for in any specific order. So be able to effectively bridge. That is, answer the question that's posed to you, then segue back to emphasizing key points. It's important to weave in interesting anecdotes and examples. Remember, these are stories. They're not assemblages of facts. And those anecdotes and examples should illustrate your key points. Don't pat yourself on the back too much, and never waste precious time with a reporter talking about anybody else's business, especially negatively. At the end of an interview, a good reporter, a good blogger will ask, do you have anything else to add? If he or she doesn't do that, then you should conclude with, hey, let me recap what we just talked about. One thing is absolutely true. The longer the interview goes, the better you get at it. So you'll be able to give a much more powerful emphasis of your key ideas in a summary at the end. One last thing to think about. If your business gets in trouble, the media may find that interesting, depending on the magnitude of the trouble. So you need to have a simple crisis response plan in place. One element of that is just to have big ears. By that I mean be alert to any potential problems in your business. They may be financial, they may be environmental, safety, employee relations, product liability, whatever. If something goes wrong, you need to know exactly who speaks for the company to reporters and other important audiences and how they do it. And here's my best advice if you're in the middle of a media maelstrom. If you mess up, fess up, fix the problem, and move forward. Okay, just a brief recap. Here are a few takeaways. Positive publicity is a very powerful marketing arrow in your quiver, but it doesn't magically happen. It takes a lot of time to do well. It takes savvy and knowledge, and it takes perseverance. They're not going to take every story you give to them, but make sure you continually give them the best stories. It's vital that you help reporters understand their interests and pressures. Personalize the story. You can't hear that enough today. Avoid what we call spray and pray. Send it out there and hope somebody picks it up. And don't forget this idea. You help them, they'll help you. Again, you treat them as professional colleagues, as respected colleagues. It's important that you know what makes news. What are you doing now or soon that's new and different? And when you're thinking of story ideas, don't think in pictures too. Please remember that. Contact them smartly. Don't send out massive numbers of news releases. Simple, compelling email pitches often work the best. And when you get their attention, be prepared to give a good interview. Focus on a few important points. Don't try to tell the entire history of everything that you're doing in your business. Focus on the most important things that relate to the story at hand, and be able to bridge. Come back to emphasizing the points that are most important. And finally, if things go sideways, have a simple crisis response plan in place. Those are just some summary ideas, and now I think we're going to take some questions.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Marilyn and Dixie, for joining in today and really helping explain the media relations landscape. At this point, we have 2 questions. Our first question is from Chris Cook, and he's asking, how do wine writers use social media to gather information? Dixie, since this was part of your presentation, would you like to talk about this first?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. In terms of using social media to gather information, I think there are a few ways. So the first would be, let's say that we or the winery itself is introducing a member of the media to a winery that they haven't heard about or they haven't thought about in a while. In this case, in the same way that a website is a place that you would immediately hop onto and say, oh, what does that look like? Who's there? They're going to do the same thing on social media. And so it's a bit of a spying or research tool to just gain a sense of the brand. And so I think that's sort of the professional side, if you will. And then the other side of things is because media are on social media, they're having conversations there. They're promoting their work. We have a lot of members of the media that are fans of wineries, and so they can also now be your customer and your fan. And so there's this, I think it's ultimately a good thing, but a blurred line. And so there's the research element, and then there's sort of this fan element where they could be rallying for you. Marilyn, I'm curious what you have to add.
Well, I think social is going to be continually important to everyone, and I think the key point is, which you made previously, if you get good coverage from someone, use your platforms to promote that. They really appreciate it. It's a rolling thunder sort of approach. So.
All right, our second question today is from Christina Diarment, and she is wondering, what does it mean to shop a story? You both touched on this, but I think Marilyn had some very solid examples. Marilyn, would you like to touch on this?
Yeah, shop a story is simply figure out what you're doing that is interesting and valuable. That's not hopelessly self-serving. That's really an important point. It has to be something, think through, you have a story to tell, it has to be filtered through a reporter and an editing process in most cases, but ultimately it's designed to go to specific audiences, so what do they need to hear? What are you trying to accomplish with them? You pull together all of the elements, the best elements of the story, and any visual components that you can possibly think of, and then you look and see which reporters would be most interested in this particular story. And can I parse it a few ways? If I tell part of it this way and part of it that way, can I extend it? Can I tell a print version specifically for wine trades that I also can configure as a business story for business publications? Is there a local radio and television station that might be interested in doing this if I have strong enough visuals? And are there wine bloggers who have covered us before that might like a piece of this story if we can present it in a slightly different way? It's put the package together, figure out specifically who you want to go after, then present it to them in a compelling way. And if they say, no, I'm not interested, have 2 or 3 other ideas in your back pocket that they might find more interesting. So that's what it is. It's figuring out who should buy and continuing to present good ideas to them.
I have a specific example, too, if you'd like one, Michelle.
That would be great.
All right. Well, I'm going to move out of the way. I'm not sure. You can't read that, but what that is, you may be able to see the logo. This is an example of shop a story, and it's also an example of, like, ask for what you want, but do so subtly. And I've mentioned Sean Sullivan before, but the context of this, he wrote about Salud's auction last year. He was one of our media guests, and he broke the story in Wine Enthusiast. So the reason we have this hanging up in our office is because it's a reminder to, shop the story well, and also that fine line of asking for what you want but not being pushy. And so the specifics of the context are, Salud being a nonprofit charitable program there is not a lot of funds to be entertaining media and a big group. And so what we do each year, we typically have 2 full pass media tickets. And we're in this position of, well, we need to get the coverage. If we invite you down and we don't get coverage, then that doesn't, achieve the objective for the program, which is, of course, so important given what their mission is. And so with Sean, the trick is, of course, he contributes to numerous outlets, like the few people who are able to make a living writing about wine full time. He's done a great job. But, frankly, having this on his personal blog was not the objective. We really wanted it to be in Wine Enthusiast, and so we put together a pitch about why wine enthusiasts might be interested in covering this, and did he think that that would be something that he could cover for them. So not saying, if we invite you down, you need to write this, but coming up with how he could sell it to them. So that's an example of Shot the Story, and also an example of there's only 2 people we can invite. So we can't invite 10 and hope that someone, spray and pray, as Marilyn said. We have to do it individually. And as soon as he says, yes, I think that will work, then he's got the ticket. So now we have to hope and make sure that, we give him everything needed to write the story.
So we have 3 more questions. The next question is for Dixie. Earlier you mentioned Instagram. What was the connection with Instagram and journalists and bloggers?
Great. So thank you for the person asking that question, because the
context. That was Spielman.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the context of that is we asked them to name their top 3 social media sites, or they could place, I don't use social media, which was not a common response. And so in terms of Instagram, 19% of respondents are using that platform professionally. Does that answer the question?
You mean, are they going there to get images or to spark the writing?
Often, as journalists are, as Marilyn, of course, knows, capturing stories, they are capturing the story visually, and so they're often posting about their experiences. We often, when we host media events for clients, we're giving them a card that has all of the social media handles, and they're posting live during the event. So I think it's a way of sharing their experience with their fans live in some cases.
Mm-hmm. All right, our next question is from Sherry Brennan, and Sherry is wanting to know if any of us are buying media lists or if we're just building our own. I can tell you that from the Wine Board's perspective, we do not buy our media lists. Every single person on that is somebody that I have a personal relationship with. Dixie and Marilyn, do you care to elaborate on how you guys do it?
Well, Dixie, you're too young to remember the days of the print copies of you could buy the wine or buy any sort of media list in the world you want, but it's so much easier to build your own now. There's no reason that you have to buy anybody else's list. The resources are available to you. It just takes some time. It's a heck of a good intern project too, if you happen to have an intern in your business.
And in terms of us, no, we're not buying media lists, but we do invest in subscription services to help us connect with journalists. There are many of those. We don't see that, though. You're not buying the relationship. What we use that for is, like, how do we fish in a bigger pond? So who do we not know? And, I mean, you could go on Google and just say, wine writer or something like that, and we can do that. We do that ourselves. Yesterday I was Googling wine writers in Kansas and Missouri. So I think, yes, there are those subscription services. It's going to be really pricey for a winery to do that, and more importantly, okay, so here is this list of people. Is it updated? I definitely don't trust the shipping address. All it is, here's a name. Hopefully the email works, and it's still your job to create a relationship. So I would say the best thing to do, assuming everyone's a member of the Oregon Wine Association, is to ask Michelle for her list, because that, that comes with supporting her team. And unless you have someone dedicated on staff who's going to look at that list and do the research and create the relationship.
But you might need to tailor it a bit for your region, too. I'm sure Michelle's list is excellent, but it probably doesn't have the Rogue Valley Messenger on it. So down
It does, in fact, Marilyn.
Oh, you got me. I have something you wouldn't have on your list.
So Kate Spielman has said that, yes, we adequately answered her question. Our last question today comes from Kate Blauburns. Kate, I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your last name. She is thanking us for a wonderful presentation, but is also planning a media luncheon for 2016. And while she understands that media from outside the area would most likely not be able to join, they would still like to invite them and attend. So what's the best way to appeal to writers outside to join us?
You go ahead, Dixie. I have an idea, but you go start.
Well, I'm thinking, as always, make it easy for them. So travel costs, lodging, pitching that story personally, it makes such a magnet that they have no option other than to be fully attracted to it. But money is involved. So, for example, we might have a client that says, oh, I want the New York Times to come out, and, well, you ready to buy a ticket from New York? So I don't mean to be tongue-in-cheek there, but I think money does talk in that scenario. You're not paying them for their time to attend, but you need to make it easy for them to get there.
Yeah, and if it's absolutely unrealistic that they come, send them a one-page summary of the most interesting things you discussed at the luncheon, and send them a bottle of what you drank and some smoked salmon, if you had smoked salmon. So sit down, and you couldn't come, sorry, but here, after the fact, you can see what we talked about.
I would totally agree with what Dixie and Marilyn just said. Another tactic would be to reach out to your regional organization, association and see if there's a way to create a bigger piece than just your media luncheon. Or partner with a couple of your other friend wineries. Maybe all of you can go in and help subsidize the cost to bring in a national writer. And most likely they'll find more appeal to that too, because then it becomes a broader story and isn't as targeted on any one winery. All right. We have one last question. Let me read this really quick. Sorry. Yes. So one of our staff members wanted me to clarify again that absolutely anyone in the Oregon wine industry has access to our media list. If there is somebody out there that you know you want to reach out to that isn't on my list, it's probably because I don't have a personal relationship with them, but I can most likely find you that information. So please, don't hesitate to reach out. You don't have to be an OWA member. There are no member dues with OWB. We are here to support you with any marketing, education, and research initiatives. So please, feel free to reach out.
Good clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Michelle, you might want to mention the handouts that are in the box there.
That is true as well. In the handouts section in the webinar, there are 2 documents that Marilyn has provided. One is an example media backgrounder, and the other one is an example fact sheet. Carrie and I here at the OWB office have also talked about creating some sample templates for things like backgrounders or what should be on a tech sheet if you're going to send samples to the media. We hope to have those coming within the next couple months. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Carrie to just round us out today and cover a couple of things.
Thank you, Michelle. Just a couple of things. Sorry, you have to. Okay, sorry about that. I want to thank you all for being really patient with us as we learn the technical system of this format. We had a couple of glitches, and I really appreciate your patience with us. You're going to be receiving an email within the next hour that's going to have a couple of links. It's going to have a link to our industry website. One moment, please. Thank you. Is where you're going to be able to find a copy of this recording. Also, we'll have a PDF of the presentation that you can refer to. You're also going to get a survey that's going to ask about this presentation particularly, but also about future presentations. Future webinars and educational offerings that we're gonna offer. We'd love to hear your feedback. It's really important that we know where you guys want us to drive this ship. It's very important. And with that, I also, sorry for our technical difficulties, I also accept feedback the old-fashioned way via email. If you'd like to email me any feedback, you like any possible workshops in the future, anything, any support that you guys need in order to make your business as effective as possible. And I want to thank our presenters today. Everyone did a great job, and thank you for joining us. And we're looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Happy holidays.